disrupted.
America that I fought.
Weird thing to happen. Hello, one and all. Welcome to this edition of Kitz Corner. Hope you're having a fantastic day so far. And folks, the mainstream media did it once again. They were able to find an opportunity once again to point the finger right at Vladimir Putin's face. The nefarious ghoul that they manufactured to be this new boogeyman that we gotta be fearful of him. But also, he's a bit lazy and confused, and he's so easily manipulated. That's why we have to go and counteract against him. Which is why this manufactured Ukraine war narrative is completely falling apart, and why majority of the country, majority of people, unless you're a vivid MSNBC or CNN viewer, can see right through this. Can see right through that this is another manufactured war that they're trying to propagate and manufacture the aggression towards Russia using Ukrainians as cannon fodder, because we wanted to go with war with Russia ever since the end of the Cold War. And strategically, this seemed to be the perfect opportunity for them to overthrow the democratically elected government in Ukraine, install this puppeteer government, form a bunch of neo-Nazis together to form this militia, and then advance, of course, warfare in Russia. Because as Adam Schiff said in Congress, the whole goal of this is to fight Russia over there and not fight Russia over here. So, now they're pointing the finger at Vladimir Putin because there was a dam that exploded alongside the Ukrainian-Russian border. And here's the story here. So it says, strategically vital Nova Kakhovka dam blew up near border with Ukraine and Russia-controlled Crimea. The dam's breach could have been a huge impact on the wider war effort in Ukraine. So, what they're doing, the mainstream media is reporting on this, and they're jumping the bandwagon to say that this is somehow strategically that Russia blew up this dam. Just like how they said strategically they blew up their own pipeline. They somehow blew up the Nord Stream pipeline that was guaranteeing them the nation's economic stability. Russia's so nefarious that they're going to blow up their own pipeline, causing an ecological disaster and ruining their own economy just to spite the West. Even saying that out loud doesn't even make sense to me. So, here's some of the pictures here. I just want to show you the impact of this. But then also going to show you why it's not what it seems. So, look at this, for example. So, this is the impact there. That was the dam that was containing the water. Now it's going through neighborhoods. And you can see it's very impactful, like a lot of damage. It's chaotic. But again, don't always take things as they seem. Because they'll tell you that Russia somehow stormed in and did this catastrophic damage despite Ukraine or Crimea or anything like that. But as Kim Iverson points out, and she's looked at this, vigorously and investigated this, she reminds us, why would Russia blow up a dam that is providing water to Russian-held areas, including Crimea? That seems like a valid question. Why would Russia blow up a hydroelectric dam that's providing water and energy to the area that Russia is defending? They're defending the Crimean area. They're defending the Donbass region. Why? Because the people and the residents there are predominantly Russian-speaking. So they're defending the Donbass region before it gets taken over by these neo-Nazis that we continue to fund and escalate through NATO advancements and Western investments in the war machine. We're continuing to advance neo-Nazis going after these people. There's been a civil war for years attacking the Donbass region, and Russia came in to defend those people. There was even an NBC report of they went over to Crimea and asked the Crimeans, do you favor more of Russia or Ukraine? And they predominantly said Russia. So why would they blow up their own dam? That's exactly the point. Similarly to how Russia supposedly blew up its own pipeline that's provided its nations with billions of dollars in revenue. By the way, I'm seeking new expert and analyst recommendations for the show. Please post below. That's just something extra that she had there. But she makes an excellent point there. Why would Russia blow up its own pipeline? Why would Russia blow up a dam that's providing water and electricity to these areas the same way they would blow up their own pipeline? None of the stories, none of the claims that the mainstream media is reporting on make any sense whatsoever. And all it is just taking a look at things and just understanding that it logically does not make sense. That Russia, to dupe us or to go against Ukraine, would destroy their own infrastructure that's providing them with resources, providing them with economic stability of their own nation. Why would they do that? That makes no sense. So, someone else to put this in perspective is Tucker Carlson. And he just made a huge comeback, posting his first show on Twitter here. And his first show on Twitter has made a huge success. Because this video that I'm about to show you here reached 100 million people. 100 million people. Tucker Carlson on Twitter. As we're watching the falling of legacy media of CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, CBS, ABC. I think they just let go more people of legacy media because they know they're never going to reach the status. They're never going to reach the status of independent content creators and investigative journalists like Tucker Carlson, who has this to say on Twitter.
Hey, it's Tucker Carlson. This morning it looks like somebody blew up the Kakhovka Dam in southern Ukraine. The rushing wall of water wiped out entire villages, destroyed a critical hydropower plant, and as of tonight puts the largest nuclear reactor in Europe in danger of melting down. So if this was intentional, it was not a military tactic, it was an act of terrorism. The question is, who did it? Well, let's see. The Kakhovka Dam was effectively Russian. It was built by the Russian government. It currently sits in Russian-controlled territory. The dam's reservoir supplies water to Crimea, which has been, for the last 240 years, home of the Russian Black Sea Fleet. Blowing up the dam may be bad for Ukraine, but it hurts Russia more. And for precisely that reason, the Ukrainian government has considered destroying it. In December, the Washington Post quoted a Ukrainian general saying his men had fired American-made rockets at the dam's floodgate as a test strike. So really, once the facts start coming in, it becomes much less of a mystery what might have happened to the dam. Any fair person would conclude that the Ukrainians probably blew it up, just as you would assume they blew up Nord Stream, the Russian natural gas pipeline, last fall. And in fact, the Ukrainians did do that, as we now know. It's not like Vladimir Putin is anxious to wage war on himself. Oh, but that's where you're wrong, Mr. and Mrs. Cable News consumer. Vladimir Putin is exactly that sort of man, the sort of man who'd shoot himself to death in order to annoy you. We know this from the American media, which wasted no time this morning in accusing the Russians of sabotaging their own infrastructure.
I just gotta say, the more I hear those type of people, like, taking shots of Vladimir Putin for every single ridiculous action and notion and trying to, make these conspiracies about how Vladimir Putin is such a nefarious person that he's going to, destroy his own pipeline. It makes me think of like a blue collar comedy sketch. Like, oh, that dog of mine, he's at it again. He's blowing up his own pipelines. He's ruining his own hydroelectric dams that's provide towns and cities that he's defending clean water and affordable electricity. Oh, he's at it again. Like, how can you watch cable news, hear what they're saying, repeat that to yourself, and believe it? I don't understand that. I don't understand how people can literally regurgitate the propaganda that's spewing right in front of your face and believe that crazy story that Vladimir Putin is going to destroy his own infrastructure to advance warfare. How does that? None of that makes sense. None of that makes sense.
Bill Kristol, the man who once told us that Saddam Hussein was responsible for 9/11, immediately denounced Putin as a war criminal and even more savagely compared him to Donald Trump. The rest of the pundit class made similar, clearly coordinated noises. Putin did it! Putin did it! And their reasoning was simple. Putin is evil, and evil people do evil things purely for the dark joy of being evil. In this specific case, Putin attacked himself, which is the most evil thing you can do, and therefore perfectly in character for a man that evil. That was their explanation. No one who's
So I'd just like to ask those people, if Vladimir Putin's evil, what is the entire U.S. empire then? If Vladimir Putin's evil, then the White House must be the epicenter of the Antichrist. It must be the portal of hell. Like, there is no one more nefarious and more evil and more sinister and more diabolical and sociopathic than Western leadership. Not a hyperbole. There is no one more sinister than the people that are in control of our Western empire. Our empire that's collapsing because we're expanding so harshly militarily that we're destroying ourselves within. Our own infrastructure is crumbling because we're waging warfare in other countries, destroying their infrastructure and thinking it's a smart investment for us. We're destroying ourselves within, and nobody in mainstream media is reporting on this except for Tucker Carlson. And he's doing this on Twitter, and he's getting massive results. I wonder why. Maybe it's because it's a clearer perspective of things. Maybe it's not regurgitated White House CIA talking points. Maybe it's actually a clear, humanized, thoughtful, invoking perspective of the situation. Which is why Tucker Carlson was favored by Democrats, Republicans, Independents, all people alike, and still continues to thrive.
paid to cover these things seem to entertain even the possibility it could have been the Ukrainians who did it. No chance of that. Ukraine, as you may have heard, is led by a man called Zelensky. And we can say for a dead certain fact that he was not involved. He couldn't have been. Zelensky is too decent for terrorism. Now, you see him on television, and it's true you might form a different impression. Sweaty and rat-like, a comedian turned oligarch, a persecutor of Christians, a friend of BlackRock. But don't believe your own eyes. Actually, Mr. Zelensky is a very good man. The best, really. As George W. Bush once noted, he is our generation's Winston Churchill. Of all the people in the world, our shifty, dead-eyed Ukrainian friend in the tracksuit is uniquely incapable of blowing up a dam. He's literally a living saint, a man in whom there is no sin. That's why Lindsey Graham is so attracted to him. They're just two good people, hanging out together and being good. And like all good people, when they meet in person, they spend a lot of time talking about killing people and laughing like friends do. Here's the pair last week.
Free or die.
Free or die.
Now you are free,
Yes.
and we will be.
And the Russians are dying.
It's the best money we've ever spent.
Thank you so much.
That was
The Russians are dying. It's the best.
The best money we've ever spent. That's what Lindsey Graham said. The best money we've ever spent is killing innocent people in a country we have nothing to deal with. The best money we've ever spent is slaughtering people. Just think about that. Think about that. That's a person of Congress announcing that out in the open to a foreign leader. The best money we've ever spent was killing innocent Russians. Just like the best money we ever spent is doing atrocity in Syria, or doing atrocity in Iraq, or doing atrocity in Afghanistan. Now you understand why there's war. It's not conflict resolution. It's not about humanitarianism or democracy or any of the bullshit terms they keep repeating at you. It's all economics. It's all for business. That's why they have to create these boogeyman. That's why they got to tell you that Vladimir Putin or Bashir al-Assad or this guy or that guy or whoever is some sort of nefarious ghoul that we have to stop and demonize. When really the real demons are the ones that are telling us who the other demons are. Lindsey Graham is a war criminal. Joe Biden is a war criminal. George Bush is a notorious war criminal. Dick Cheney is a war criminal. Barack Obama is a war criminal. Has anyone ever questioned them or looked at them and their records? No. But Tucker Carlson, out of all people, out of all the mainstream people, is giving us a perspective unlike ever before.
Best money we've ever spent, Graham says. A smile spreads across his thin, quivering lips as he forms the words. He looks like a starving man contemplating a breakfast buffet. The aroma of death has aroused Lindsey Graham. Thanks so much, replies Zelensky. He feels the same way. See, there's nothing dark here. Just two middle-aged guys celebrating the killing of a population. They don't seem like the kind of people who'd enjoy flooding villages or starting a famine. And in any case, who cares if they are? It's really not your business. Your job is to support Ukraine. Watch Nikki Haley, a Republican candidate for president, explain this principle on CNN.
A win for Ukraine is a win for all of us. And for them to sit there and say that this is a territorial dispute, that's just not the case. To say that we should stay neutral, it is in the best interest of America. It's in the best interest of our national security for Ukraine to win. We have to see this through. We have to finish it.
See? It's very easy to understand. It is vitally important for you to support Ukraine because it's necessary for Ukraine to be supported by you. Your support is
because we don't want to see Lindsey Graham's investment belly up. That's why there's a national interest to this. That's why this is part of national security, because we invested so much money in this. If this goes belly up, oh my God, the war machine's over. Then people won't believe us anymore. And then, oh my God, they might ask us to cut back the Defense Department. Oh my God, Raytheon might have a pay cut. We might have to actually investigate that $21 trillion that went missing in the Pentagon. Oh my God. We need Ukraine to win. We need Ukraine to win. Zelensky, please. You have to win. They're losing faith in the war machine. That's what this is really about. That is why even Nikki Haley, mainstream Republican, is toting this line. It's both Democrats and Republicans because they're both bought by the war machine. They're both bought by the oligarchies of Raytheon and Lockheed Martin and Boeing and Northrop Grumman and all these nefarious ghouls that are in the business of slaughtering each other. They are making record profits off this. And the fact that we're taking our own money, taxpayer money, the treasury that's supposed to go towards, infrastructure, healthcare, jobs, increasing wages, public services, all of that is being completely flooded out and sent off to the most corrupted nation in Eastern Europe. Why? Because it is an investment to slaughter more people and they'll get a bigger return at the end. We're not going to see that money. America's not going to see that money. But the military contractors, the profiteers, people like Lindsey Graham, Nikki Haley, who have investments in it, are definitely going to see it through.
It's mandatory until it's finished, whatever it is, and whatever that means. So shut up and support Ukraine, or else you're in trouble. Back when they still taught logic, statements like this were known as tautologies. Something is true because it is. The more you repeat it, the truer it becomes. It's a self-reinforcing reality. There was a time when tautologies were considered illegitimate arguments, not to mention hilariously stupid. Only dumb people talk like that. Now everybody in power talks like that. Diversity is our strength. Trans women are women. Zelensky is Churchill. It's all self-evidently true. Doesn't need an explanation, and don't ask questions. Sound familiar? Of course it does. That's the pap they're serving us day after day in steaming, lumpy portions. By this point, it's possible that American citizens are the least informed people in the world. Your average yak herder in Tajikistan knows who blew up the Nord Stream pipeline. It's obvious. Does he think some skinny dude in a dress is actually a girl? Come on. That idea would never occur to him. You've got to be lied to at full volume over a period of years in order to reach conclusions like that. And of course, we have been. The media lie. They do. But mostly they just ignore the stories that matter. What's happened to the hundreds of billions of US dollars we've sent to Ukraine? No clue. Who organized those BLM riots 3 years ago? No one's gotten to the bottom of that. What exactly happened on 9/11? Well, it's still classified. How did Jeffrey Epstein make all that money? How did he die? How about JFK? And so endlessly on. Not only are the media not interested in any of this, they are actively hostile to anybody who is. In journalism, curiosity is the gravest crime. Yesterday, for example, a former Air Force officer who worked for years in military intelligence came forward as a whistleblower to reveal that the US government has physical evidence of crashed non-human-made aircraft, as well as the bodies of the pilots who flew those aircraft. The Pentagon has spent decades studying these otherworldly remains in order to build more technologically advanced weapons systems. Okay, that's what the former intel officer revealed, and it was clear he was telling the truth. In other words, UFOs are actually real, and apparently so is extraterrestrial life. Now we know. In a normal country, this news would qualify as a bombshell, the story of the millennium. But in our country, it doesn't. The whistleblower's account ran on a technology website called The Debrief, which you've probably never heard of. The Washington Post had that story, but decided not to run it. The New York Times, meanwhile, just pretended it never happened. On the front page of the New York Times website this morning, there were 5 stories about Ukraine, as well as 4 stories apiece about Donald Trump, trans people, and climate change, the usual lineup.
Well, in the New York Times defense, they did tell their own readers not to read. Which still to this day, and probably to my grave, will be the most hilarious take the New York Times has ever had on any story. When they announced to their own readers not to read into COVID. That is the most hilarious thing I've ever seen the New York Times ever publish. The New York Times, one of the biggest publications on planet Earth, telling its own readers not to look into COVID. Do not go through the rabbit hole. Do not read into things. Don't read medical journals. What do doctors know? Trust Fauci. That is it's still hands down one of the most hilarious things, and I will laugh about that every single time until my eventual death. I'll take that to the grave. That is it's still the most hilarious thing I've ever seen out of any news publication whatsoever. But Tucker Carlson making huge, excellent points here. And the fact that he's mentioning about how the news media is cultivating these schemes and like in the acts of just not reporting it and being hostile. And he's again, the reason why this guy is popular, and there's a lot of things I disagree with Tucker Carlson on. I don't agree with him on everything. But the reason I favor him more than any other person in the mainstream universe is because he is an individual that gives a different perspective than the corporate conglomerate machine that spews mass disinformation to you and expects you to regurgitate it, being propagandized. At least he's bringing you a different story. He's bringing you a clearer picture of how this all plays together. And the fact that, they could spend hours and hours cultivating stories about how Vladimir Putin's this evil guy, or Donald Trump is doing this nefarious thing, or, creating this, subdrama of cancel culture and culture wars and all this stuff, which is why I strongly believe that all these, Bud Light and Miller Lite and all this stuff about trans and woke and all this stuff is nothing more than a distraction. Because there is actual stories, there is actual news reports that need to be addressed. There's actual critical information that people need to understand, but they're not getting that. And it's because newsrooms are filled with garbage. They are filled with garbage. And if anyone is curious, like myself or anybody else, and wants to know about information like Epstein or JFK or 9/11 or anything else, they will get demonized. The same way the New York Times demonized their own readers for being curious. Which is downright disgusting. It's downright disgusting. We're supposed to encourage people to be curious, because curiosity leads to investigating, leads to research, leads to reading. And when you read more, you know more. And when you know more, you grow as a person. And when people are more knowledgeable about things, society gets better. It actually evolves better for society. The more knowledge and information people have about the whereabouts of their government and the whereabouts of, the criminal cabal that's oppressing us. But they don't want us to know that, because they want to continue their criminality in dark.
There was nothing at all about how an alien species is flying hypersonic aircraft over our cities. Not one word.
Wow.
So if you're wondering why our country seems so dysfunctional, this is a big part of the reason. Nobody knows what's happening. A small group of people control access to all relevant information, and the rest of us don't know. We're allowed to yap all we want about racism, but go ahead and talk about something that really matters and see what happens. If you keep it up, they'll make you be quiet. Trust us. That's how they maintain control. When Western tourists first started traveling in large numbers to the Soviet Union in the early 1970s, they found that many Russians had a completely warped understanding of the United States. They thought that Americans lived in grinding poverty, in a state of perpetual race war, and were desperate to flee to the freedom and prosperity of the Eastern Bloc. They thought this because that's what they had been told. They had no way to know otherwise. The few Russians who understood what was really going on in the rest of the world had learned about it from listening to shortwave radio broadcasts, sometimes under the covers so the neighbors wouldn't hear. 50 years later, it is bewildering to consider the ironies here. We're the ones who live in ignorance now. The US government has managed to classify more than 1 billion so-called public documents. So at this point, we can't possibly know what our leaders are doing. We're not allowed to know. By definition, that is not a democracy. Yet it's fine with the media. Secrecy is a powerful tool of control. Stop asking how we got so rich. Here's another story about racism. Go eat each other. That's the program. That's how most of us now live here in the United States. Manipulated by lies, silenced by taboos. It is unhealthy and it's dehumanizing, and we're tired of it. As of today, we've come to Twitter, which we hope will be the shortwave radio under the blankets. We're told there are no gatekeepers here. If that turns out to be false, we'll leave. But in the meantime, we are grateful to be here. We'll be back with much more very soon.
And just to remind people, that episode we just watched, 100 million people tuned into this, and it's still continuing to thrive. If Rachel Maddow, Chris Hayes, Lawrence O'Donnell, Anderson Cooper, Wolf Blitzer, any other predominant media figurehead, stenographer of the corporate establishment had an ounce of what you just saw there, just a little bit of what you just saw there from Tucker Carlson, maybe they would have better ratings. Maybe people would actually somewhat have a like for the mainstream media. Because right now, the mainstream media is tanking, and they know this. They know this. They just fired off a bunch of popular figures like Don Lemon, and I think Chuck Todd's also on the list too. They fired off a bunch of people because they know that it's tanking, it's plummeting. People don't trust the legacy media anymore because they know what the legacy media is about. And Tucker Carlson, being part of the legacy media and now being on Twitter, he's now announcing his past. He's announcing that what he saw, being part of it, that the mainstream media is full of lies, it's full of scandals. They publish stories that conflict, other news, important information to distract people from the important information, to keep us ignorant and fighting with each other. And that's pretty much the basis of every single news program. It's not relevant information that's actually useful to everybody. It's trying to keep us segregated and angry and yelling at each other over the most ridiculous, redundant things imaginable. And that's why this guy is getting a lot of heat. Still, even after being kicked out of Fox, even getting, the short end of the stick and now having to go to Twitter, which, I think is actually beneficial to him because Twitter, I think, is a more sustainable platform for him than any time he's been on Fox, and he's allowed to say more on social media than other people. He's still getting so much flack for this because he's revealing the truth. He's pulling the curtain and exposing the darkness, the corruption, the criminal cabal that has control over us, and why we're being lied to, why we're being misinformed, and why, majority of this population is so crazy and cringeworthy and, screaming and shouting at each other when really we need to be uniting together to fight against the true evils that are oppressing us, every single one of us. And why, there's still people out there that want more censorship out there. And why I have to keep reminding people that censorship is the truest form of evil in any human society. Name one point in all of history that censoring critical information from the general public works in favor for the general public. Name one time in history. You can't. Because they tried that multiple times. That was called the Dark Ages. And society did not flourish. It actually went backwards. The peasants were misinformed, were completely ignorant, and didn't know what was going on. And the clergy at the time, who had all the information, were continuing to oppress and dominate. Until someone decided, hey, enough is enough. We need to rise together to fight against true evil. And the true evil is the U.S. Western imperialistic empire. I know it sounds like a Star Wars term, but that is the true faces of evil in this world.